Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Harvard Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah sessions. We're on session 210 and we're coming towards the end of the ninth year of the Hijrah, which is also known as Am al-Wufud, the year of the delegation. And we'll sort of cross over some stories from the 9th and 10th year as well, because they're fairly linked together. Quick recap: last week, session 209, we did principally the Christians from Najran who came. Prophet sent them a letter with the option to either become Muslim, if not pay jizya and accept Muslim political rule over your land, if not, be ready for war. So the Najranis sent a high-powered delegation, 60+ people, to Medina to negotiate with the Prophet, and then they arrived. The Prophet allowed them to do some of their Christian prayer rituals inside the mosque of the Prophet. Then there was some interfaith dialogue around what does Islam say about this, that, or the other. Questions related to Isa alayhi salam, the nature of Christ, Ibrahim, etc. And then Allah revealed about 60 verses from Surah Al-Imran devoted to answering these questions and these matters. And then finally, the Prophet ﷺ, after a lot of toing and froing, he challenged them to mubahala, which basically calling their bluff, saying basically, if you think you're right, we think we are right, let's invoke Allah's curse on those who are liars. But the delegation then had talked amongst themselves, and then basically they backed down and agreed to pay jizya, i.e. to stay Christians, but to accept political rule of the Muslims over their territory. So the Muslims extended their political authority to that part of Najran. We also talked about, on the way back, Abu Ubaidah was sent along with them as a judge, but then on the way, when the Najranis were going back, the younger brother of the bishop or the main patriarch, he said something bad against the Prophet and the Muslims, and he was rebuked by his older brother, who was the bishop, the patriarch, who basically said, he is the prophet, don't say anything like that to him, in which case the younger brother freaked out. Well, how come you're not become a Muslim? And he said, well, do you expect us to give up everything that we have? So the younger brother then went back and became a Muslim and accepted the Prophet as the true prophet. We also talked about some other minor stories, the tribe of Muzayna, who witnessed the miracle of the dates in Umar ibn al-Khattab's house. There was the miracle related to the pagan tribe of Jurash, who sent a delegation to the Prophet after the rival tribe, the Azd tribe, to become Muslims, and the Prophet sent al-Surad ibn Abdullah al-Azdi to the tribe of Azd and asked them to, pacify the pagan tribe of Jurash. And then on the day that they were there, on the day that the envoys came to Medina, the battle had just begun, and the Prophet made a dua for them, for the people of Juraysh, who then later on, when they found out the story, became Muslim. We also said briefly the story of Banu Tamim, who came from the Najd, and they were Bedouins, and they were given the glad tidings, and then they wanted something in return, not just glad tidings. And the Prophet stayed quiet, and then the tribe of Himyar came from the Yemen, and the Prophet said, take the glad tidings, because the tribe of Banu Tamim, they have refused the glad tidings, so they got double glad tidings. And then we were just starting, the Yemeni kings had sent delegations and letters, and we talked briefly about Muadh ibn Jabal, and we'll inshallah talk more about that in today's session. So one of the other delegations, again, that we briefly mentioned was the Suda delegation, which came after the Prophet's departure from Al-Jirana, and that was in the 8th year of Hijrah, but the Prophet had already dispatched 400 Muslims and asked them to go wherever Suda went. And they found this, so there was a freshwater fountain in the Yemen area. And then when they were camped there, we mentioned how they camped at the starting point of the canal. And then Zaid ibn al-Harith al-Sudai, he learned that they were camped there and they were ready to attack. So he sent, or he was sent as a delegate to Prophet ﷺ to request that the army be sent back, and the Prophet ﷺ said, agreed to that. So he went back and urged the people, the whole tribe in the area around the fountain to become Muslim, which they did, and they sent a delegation, we mentioned briefly, of 100 men in the farewell pilgrimage, which inshallah will probably start next week or maybe even the week after. And there's not much left. So there's a few stories around the Prophet's household. There's the Hajj al-Wada, the farewell pilgrimage, and then there's the Prophet's last illness and demise. So we're literally right at the cusp of the Seerah. Another delegation was a group of delegates came to the Prophet ﷺ. This was led by Zaid Al-Khair, and the Prophet ﷺ urged him to become a Muslim. This delegation from Tai, they agreed, and about Zaid, the Prophet ﷺ said, the Arabs are never exact in estimating people. They have never told me about the virtues of a man correctly, for when I see the man concerned, I realize that they have overestimated him, except Zaid Al-Khair. When I met him, I knew that they had underestimated him. So basically saying that the Arabs tend to big up unnecessarily lots of people. And whenever the Prophet met somebody who's been hyped up by the people, he's a bit disappointed, right? Except this person, Zaid, he was given the title Zaid Al-Khair, Zaid the Bounteous, because he was not hyped up as much as how good he was. So that's a nice little story there. And again, other delegations came throughout Amal Wufud, and we've talked about some of them, and just going through a list of here. We've talked about Al-Az, the Bani Sa'd, Hadim from Quda, Bani Amr bin Qais. We talked about Bani Asad, Bahra, Khawlain, Muharrab, Bani Al-Harith bin Qab, we mentioned briefly, Al-Ghamid, we've talked before in the Seerah, Bani Al-Muntafiq, there's Salaman, Bani Abs, Muzayna, we talked about just now about with the dates, Muadh, Qabid, Bani Kinda, one of the big tribes, we've talked about them before, the Murrah, Ghassan, Bani Aish, and Nakh, and they were a group of, the last group of delegates, it said, of about 200 men, so really big delegation, and they arrived in the middle of Muharram in the 11th year of Al-Hijrah. So again, just to mention that the reason to go through the list is just to demonstrate that delegations were coming literally from the 5th or 6th year onwards of the Hijrah, but more so after the conquest of Makkah, and obviously when the Prophet returned from Tabuk. So a lot of the chroniclers have put them all in the sort of the 9th, 10th year Hijrah. The last few to mention here, which are significant, are to do with the Yemen. And the Prophet, as we said, had sent letters to the kings and princes of Yemen, and after he'd come back from Tabuk, there were some letters from some of these kings, the kings of Himyar, Al-Harith bin Abdul Khalil, from Na'im bin Khilal, and An-Numan bin Qil the Ra'in, Hamdan and Mu'athir. And so they sent a letter from themselves to the Prophet through a messenger, Malik bin Murrah al-Rahawi, and the letter basically informed the Prophet that these kings and princely states were wanting to become Muslim. Obviously, they're seeing the tide turning, everyone's going there, lots of people are finding out about Islam, and so they also wanted to become Muslim, and they said that they will leave polytheism completely behind. So the Prophet he gave them the pledge of Allah and his pledge, and provided they pay the tribute, the jizya, which was overdue, and then he sent Muadh ibn Jabal. And we'll talk about Muadh ibn Jabal because there's a lot of learning from the Prophet sending Muadh. So the letter came in the 9th year, but the Prophet sent Muadh in the 10th year. And Muadh was sent to be the Prophet's sort of deputy and to judge over the people. And it's a really famous incident where the Prophet he's walking along. Muadh is sat on his camel and is about to go to Yemen. So again, this is such a blessing for Muadh, that he sat on a camel. The Prophet is walking. It's a very famous incident. And the Prophet said, look, you're going to go to these people. They are the people of the book. Many of the people from Yemen were either from a Jewish background or were from a Christian background. So they were learned, they had civilization, they had an understanding of prophecy, etc. So he said to them, Mu'adh, make sure that you call them to Tawheed, make them believe in Allah. And if they listen, ask them to pray. And if they listen, ask them to give zakah. And then we'll talk more about that. And Prophet Musa said, look, it's possible that you won't see me again after this. So it's like a farewell to Mu'adh and giving him some gems of information. But just as a step back from that, the story behind Mu'adh is that Mu'adh was known to be really generous with people. And so when people came up to him, because he had this reputation of being generous, people would come and ask of things from Mu'adh. And so being generous, he would then give them stuff, or he would borrow from other people and give them what they needed. And so it got to a stage where he basically was in a lot of debt because he'd given lots of things to people who'd come asking for it. Because some people maybe saw him as a soft target, etc. So because he was in a lot of debt, he then went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, can you ask my creditors to forego the debt? So basically, can they, cancel the debt that he's in? So the Prophet ﷺ, he personally went to these creditors on behalf of Mu'adh and said, can you cancel the debt for Mu'adh? And most of the creditors said no, they wanted what they were owed. So then he was declared bankrupt. His wealth was divided and split up to pay off the creditors, and he was left with nothing at all. And so this was sort of in the 9th year. So when it comes to the 10th year of Hijrah, inshallah, which we'll do then, this is when the Prophet was going for Hajj. So he then decides to send Muadh ibn Jabal and Abu Musa al-Ashari to Yemen to be there to judge over the people, because they know Islam and they've been around the Prophet for some years. So then he's sent to Yemen by the Prophet. The Prophet gave him express instructions that he can use some of the money he raises from the treasury for himself to invest and to earn a living. And so that's what happened. He went. We'll sort of just finish this bit of the story. He went. Prophet went for Hajj and then passed away. And by the time Mu'adh comes back from Yemen, the Prophet has died, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is Khalif. So when he comes back, he comes out with this money from the treasury. He comes and he gives the portion back to Abu Bakr as Khalif, and he takes his own investment and proportion with him. So Umar then goes to Muadh and says, look, you need to return all of the money back to Abu Bakr, who's Khalif, and to the treasury. And then Muadh says, no, Prophet sent me with this express permission that I use this money to get myself back on my feet. So I'm not going to give it all back. And so Umar, and we know how fastidious Umar was about these issues of ruling and about money and finances and governorship, etc. So he went to Abu Bakr and he complained and said, look, take all the money, leave him a little bit, but take it all back because it's setting a precedent. But then Abu Bakr, he upheld Muadh's money, basically saying the Prophet sent him with the intention that he improves his finances, so let him keep that money. That night, Muadh has a dream, and then in the morning he goes and he gives all the money back to Abu Bakr Siddiq. And then he goes and explains to Umar, says basically, I saw a dream last night. I was being dragged into the fire, into a hellfire, and you were holding me back. So verily I will give all my money back to Abu Bakr as in the Bayt al-Mal. So he gave all the money back, and then Abu Bakr gave him the money back. So again, just making sure precedence is there. So that's what, a related story about Muadh and why one of the reasons why he was sent to the Yemen. And so with the Prophet ﷺ, again, really famous incidents. He's basically saying, make things easy for the people. Don't make things hard for the people of Yemen. You're going there to do Dawah. You're not going there to do jihad. You're going there to do Dawah. So make things easy. Do not make things difficult. Give people glad tidings. Don't turn them away. Cause people to come together and don't be the cause of disunity. And again, too often we find people, who pride themselves in causing fitna and disunity, and they don't want to bring people together. And again, that's a trait that we see amongst people. It's divide and rule. Whereas Prophet is saying it's the exact opposite. Rather than causing disunity, bring people together. There's so much barakah in that. So he sends Muadh ibn Jabal, and there's a long conversation in lots of different hadith about the instructions. So he basically said, the people of Yemen are the people of the book. Make things easy, don't make things difficult, give people glad tidings, don't turn them away, and cause people to come together, don't cause people to disunite. Let them testify in the Shahada, let them believe in Allah, in Tawheed. If they believe in Allah, then obligate on them the 5 daily prayers. If they start to pray the 5 daily prayers, then obligate on them zakah. So again, it's a very stepwise way. And then, he said, but take from the rich, obligate on them zakah, so that you take from the rich and give it to their poor. So again, it's setting a precedence here. It doesn't always have to be like that, but the precedence is that if you collect the zakah from a certain area, you should or you can spend it amongst the poor there. You can also obviously send it back to the Khalif in the Bayt al-Mal, but you are allowed to, and some scholars say that you are encouraged to spend the wealth that's collected in zakah, from where you collect it. But that's a fiqh point. The Prophet also said, be aware of the best of their property. So basically, when you're a tax collector and you're collecting the zakah, you're collecting a tithe or whatever of their property or their livestock. He said, don't take the best things. Don't take the worst things. Just take the average things, right? So don't look for the best animals. Look for decent animals. Not the worst, not the best, but just take the average ones. So be aware of the best part of their property. And also be aware of the prayer of the oppressed. He's telling this to Muadh. Don't oppress people. Be aware of the prayer of the oppressed, because nothing stands in the way of that dua from Allah. So basically, if you oppress people and they make a dua to Allah, there's nothing between Allah and the dua. So just be really careful that do not be oppressive to other people. And then, like we said before, the Prophet said, look, you may not see me again. Next time you visit, you might pass by my grave and my mosque. So I'm sending you to a people who have soft hearts, and they will fight for the truth twice. So basically recruit them, get them on your side. And then he get, because Muadh obviously breaks down and starts crying because he knows that, the Prophet he might not see the Prophet again, and the Prophet then tries to pacify and calm him down by saying, and this is really important for all of us, the Prophet then said, the people closest to me are the people of Taqwa, wherever they are and whoever they are. So if we become the people of Taqwa, we know, it's a promise that we will be close to the Prophet. That's such a beautiful reassurance, not just for Muadh, but for us, right? Other things that the Prophet told Muadh, be aware of luxury because the servants are not supposed to be luxurious. And then this is another really famous piece of advice, and we'll do this inshallah. We've done this before, but we'll do this again when we do Usul al-Fiqh. He turns to Muadh and says, how will you judge between the people? And Muadh says, I will judge between them in whatever is in the Qur'an or the Sunnah or the path of the Prophet. And then the Prophet says, well, if you don't find it in there, and then Muadh says, well, I will, use my ijtihad, my interpretation based upon these things. So again, and the Prophet is tacitly approving of the process of ijtihad when he's talking to Muadh here. And again, this is a very important fiqh point which we'll come on to later on, inshallah, when we do Usul al-Fiqh. And again, so it's a really beautiful piece of advice. Do not make life difficult for Muslims. Do not make life difficult for new Muslims, right? And again, at the moment, we find a lot of scholars and ulama who pride themselves in making Islam hard, because then they come across all pious, right? And so they want to put obstacles in the front of people rather than bringing people to Islam. So again, it's about approaching Islam, doing dawah with hikmah, not cancelling things out, but doing things appropriately. And that stepwise approach is what in dawah is what the Prophet was instructing Muadh. So a final story about Muadh going to Yemen. So the Prophet he sends Muadh, and he also sends Abu Musa al-Ashari. We talked about Abu Musa al-Ashari again. He's a late convert, and again these two people, Abu Musa especially, he had signs of leadership. So the Prophet could recognize people who would be good leaders. You can tell people who could be leaders. You can tell people who are leaders. You can tell people who are followers. So some people have this innate quality where that they will be good at leading. Abu Musa al-Ashari, he came from a noble background. He's been sort of tutored in that art of leading, and he is leadership material. So the Prophet he also sends Muadh. He sends Abu Musa al-Ashari to a different part of Yemen, and Muadh to a different part of Yemen. So different provinces. So they talk amongst themselves. Again, this was a bit later on, and they agree that they're both going to the Yemen, but whenever they are close to each other, they should try to meet up, and they renew their salam with each other. And again, it's a beautiful thing to say. If your friends, your mates, you're basically saying, well, look, whenever we're nearby, let's meet up and let's renew our salam and give each other nasiha, advice, and discuss our affairs, which is what they did. And there's one famous occasion where Muadh he is in the province, and he knows that Abu Musa is nearby, so they send messengers and they agree to meet up. So then Muadh he goes and visits Abu Musa al-Ashari, and then as he's visiting the camp, he sees Abu Musa, and there's a chap who's tied up with his hands tied around his neck. And then Muadh says, who's this person? And then Abu Musa says, well, this is an apostate. And some say he was from a Jewish background, he became Muslim, and then he reverted back and became a non-Muslim. So Muadh riwayat says, who's this? Abu Musa says he's an apostate, murtad. So Muadh says, I'm not coming down from my camel, my mount, until that person is executed. And then he repeated that a second time, and then Abu Musa said, that's fine, that's why we're here. And then once that was done, Muadh and Jabal came down from his mount. Again, they're just chatting and chilling out, and Muadh then sort of gives some advice to, and this is again a really important point for us. They're chatting, and Muadh says, how do you recite the Qur'an? How do you read the Qur'an? What's your habits? What's your process of reading the Qur'an? And then Abu Musa goes, well, I read the Qur'an continuously, piece after piece, and then I take a break, piece after piece. And basically, the phrase he used was like milking the camel or milking a cow. So you milk it for a bit, and then you rest, and then you go back and milk some more, and then you rest, and you do that continuously, day and evening. So that's how Abu Musa would read the Qur'an. So he would exhaust himself by piecemeal reading the Qur'an. And then he turns to Muadh and says, well, how do you read the Qur'an? So then Muadh says to him, I sleep the first part of the night. So I take my need of sleep. And then I wake up and I read as much Qur'an as Allah permits me. And therefore, I count my sleep as a rewardable action, just like my prayer. And again, this is a beautiful, deep way of thinking about reframing your actions. And we've talked about this many times before, how to reframe your actions. If you frame it through the lens of God consciousness, of Taqwa, it can be that every action you do is a rewardable action. Right? So he's basically teaching Abu Musa that you exhaust yourself, yet I count my rest as ibadah. Right? And it's just a beautiful perspective where your daily habits can be rewarded as long as you're doing them for the sake of Allah, or as long as you're doing these habits to improve your relationship with Allah. Right? So whether you're eating, you're sleeping, you're exercising, if you're doing these things expressly with a view to having a closer relationship with Allah, so you're able to pray better, then those actions can become, rather than habitual, can become rewardable. So again, it's a really deep and profound understanding. So that's both of them. Just to finish off again, whilst we're talking about Yemen, Prophet praised the people of Yemen in many places, and we talked about the number of delegations that come from Yemen. In Sahih Muslim, Prophet said, the people of Yemen have come to you. They have the best of souls and the softest of hearts. And in another famous hadith, the Prophet says, faith is Yemeni and wisdom is Yemeni. And in Bukhari, the Prophet said, oh Allah, bless us in our Shams and in our Yemen. And the Prophet was making this dua about the Shams, which is Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, that area, Shams. So bless us in our Shams and in our Yemen. So both these provinces and areas weren't under Muslim control then. But the Prophet is predicting that and asking Allah to bless the people from those areas. And again, that's, we see the Umayyad Khilafah, setting themselves up in Shams. And as the Prophet said, and the Hadith of the Prophet says, bless us in our Shams and in our Yemen. There's a person in the audience who said, oh, how about Najd, O Messenger of Allah? And the Prophet repeated, Allah blesses in our Shams and in our Yemen. So he stood up again and said, what about our people of Najd? And for a third time he stood up and said, what about the people of Najd? The Prophet didn't say anything about them. And the Prophet then pointed to the direction of Najd and said, from there comes the fitna and the problems and the trials and the tribulations they will come from Ad-Najd. So again, that's a lovely little hadith where again he's bigging up the people of Yemen and Shams. Another one on the Prophet says, on the day of judgment, I will be the one in charge of the fountain of the water, al-Kawthar, and I will be the one who makes sure I will be making space for the people of Yemen, and I will be beating back people with my stick until space is made for the people of Yemen. In another hadith, the people of Yemen will be one of the first people to drink from al-Kawthar, the Prophet's fountain. And again, as the Prophet is bigging up Yemen, by inference he's also praising the Aus and the Khazraj from Medina, the Ansar, because their lineage are the Arabs from the Yemen. And again, we've mentioned before, but in the battles of Ridda, the battles of apostasy, when other people became Murtad, the people of Yemen were at the forefront of defending Islam and keeping people on the straight path. So that's that. Final few little minor stories. Now that we've finished with the delegations from the Yemen, there's a delegation or the story of Farwah from Bani Amr al-Judhami, right? And Farwah was an Arab leader in the Byzantium army. So he was the sort of proxy ruler that the Byzantium army had put to govern their area and the allies that were allied to the Christian Byzantians. And his hometown was Muadh. He witnessed the Muslims in the Battle of Muadh, and he was obviously very impressed. And then obviously, that was in the 8th year of Hijrah. And then sort of later on, he'd heard about Islam, and then he decided to look into it, and then he became a Muslim. And so Farwah sent a white mule gift, a white mule to the Prophet as a gift, and informed the Prophet of his conversion. The Byzantians, they found out that he'd become a Muslim. Obviously, he's the chief there, so they captured him and sent him to prison, and then basically gave him an ultimatum: either leave Islam or be punished to death. He refused to apostatize, so they crucified him and cut his neck in a water or a fountain called Afra, which is in Palestine. Then there's the Udhara delegation, about 12 men who arrived in Medina in Safar of the 9th year. They spent about 3 days in Medina. One of these people was Hamza bin An-Numan. And when they were asked who they were, they said, we are Bani Udhara, the foster brothers of Qusay. And we did Qusay 3-4 years ago, the ancestors of Abdul Muttalib. We are the foster brothers of Qusay to his mother. So they remember this. We are the ones who supported Qusay, and we removed the Khuzaa and Bani Bakr from the bosom of Makkah. And we talked about this, if you can remember, years ago, that the Khuzaa, they'd taken over Makkah, and then Qusay, he married into Khuzaa, and then he overthrew the Khuzaa leadership and became undisputed, unified Qurayshi leader. And so they said, we removed them from the bosom of Makkah. We have relatives and kinspeople. And so the Prophet said to them, give good tidings to them, which is Shams, the conquest. So he's predicting that these will be at the forefront of conquering Shams. And then he gave them instructions and forbade them from consulting soothsayers and from eating the slain animals that they had slaughtered. And then they all became Muslim and they went back. There's another delegation, the Bali delegation, who arrived in Rabi Awal, 9th year. They embraced Islam, stayed again for 3-4 days. Their chief, Abu Dabib, he had this conversation with the Prophet, and he said, whether hospitality, looking after the travelers, being hospitable, was rewarded by Allah. The Prophet says yes. And so is any charity you offer to the poor or the rich people, that is sadaqah. So the Beeb, he asked the Prophet what is the time allocated for hospitality? So when you have a traveler or people who come from out of town, how many days are you obligated to look after them? The Prophet says 3 days. So then he inquired, well, what about the stray ewe? And the Prophet said, it's either yours or your brother's, otherwise it goes to the wolf. And then he inquired about the stray camel, and the Prophet said, that's none of your business, leave it alone, its owner will try to find it. And then another sort of interaction that we learned some fiqh from is again from one of the Yemeni delegations, somebody called Muadh ibn Haytham. He came to the Prophet and said, what is it allowed to show of your awrah? And what are we not allowed to show of our awrah? And again, it's a really well-known hadith of the Prophet he said, cover your awrah from everyone other than your spouse, right? So, it's about being modest in your dress, and you need to cover up from everyone other than your spouse. So Muawiyah ibn Haytham, he says, well, what if I'm alone? And Prophet basically said, there is more right upon Allah that you be shy of him, right? So again, just because you're alone doesn't mean you should strut around revealing your awrah at home, even if no one's there. Again, it's about being modest. Another hadith, there was Al-Hakam al-Khazan from Banu Qaws, and he said, we came to the Prophet, there were about 9 of us, we entered upon him and said, we've come so that you may pray for us. The Prophet made a dua for us, and he took care of us, and he was hospitable, and he fed us. And then we stayed in Medina for a few days, and we prayed Jummah, and I saw him giving Jummah, holding onto a stick. And I remember one phrase in the khutbah, O people, do what you can and know that you will never be able to do everything you've been commanded, right? So cover up and come closer. So basically, he's basically saying, look, I was there for the Jummah khutbah. One of the things I remember the Prophet said, look, you will never be able to do everything that you've been commanded to do, but do the best you can, right? And just because you can't do everything perfectly doesn't mean you give up. I mean, you see this tendency among some people where they feel that they just want to give up if they can't do things, completely. Prophet says, no, it's not about being maximalist. It's doing as much as you can, the best you can, and cover up those things that you can't do, and don't. You would never be perfect, but at least do the best you can. Make the effort. There's the delegation from Banu Fazara who came. They became Muslim, and they were suffering from a drought. So they asked the Prophet to pray for rain, and the Prophet did that, and then it rained. And then finally, there is the Tujeeb Delegation came to Medina with a surplus of sadaqah for their people, so they had extra charity that they couldn't give to the poor in their area. There were 13 men, and they came and they asked about the Qur'an and the Sunnah and about the Prophet and his actions, his deeds, and what they should do and what they can learn. And so they gave them their extra money. They gave them their pledges, and so the Prophet acknowledged them. And then as they were leaving, there was a young man amongst them who said to the Prophet, by Allah, I swear I've left my home for Medina with a purpose that you invoke Allah, the Great and the Almighty, for me, to forgive me and have mercy on me, and to make my heart a source of content and sufficiency. So again, it's just so beautiful. You've got this one person who's so eager to come, and then he comes with this specific thing that he wants this dua for himself. And again, it's about knowing that you're never going to meet the Prophet ever again. And this is your one opportunity, and it's about getting the most you can, most benefit you can from that interaction. And again, sometimes we come into the orbit of people who are really knowledgeable or who are really great. Don't just waste that opportunity. Use that opportunity to better yourself, right? And this is what this person was doing. This is his elevator pitch. He wants to do something for himself to better himself. And so he asked the Prophet ﷺ for this gem, and the Prophet ﷺ made a dua for him. And it said from that time on, he was the most contented person. And in the wars of Ridda, which will start just over a year from now, in the apostasy times, in the wars of Ridda, it said that he stood fast as a Muslim and warned his people, reprimanded them, and reminded them of Allah. And then he went on preaching to them and convincing them to stay on the straight path and not to apostatize. And that's what happened. And again, there's a group of them that had come as a delegate later on during the farewell pilgrimage, which inshallah again we'll talk maybe not next week or towards the end of next week we'll start, or the week after inshallah. So I'll finish there inshallah. We've finished with Amul Wufud, the year of delegations, and some of the other delegations. Talked a lot about Yemen and Muadh ibn Jabal, but there's such a wealth of information there inshallah. So I'll finish there inshallah. Do remember us and the Ummah in your du'as, and those people who are suffering, especially those who are suffering, war and famine, and those who've been driven from their home, especially the Muslims as well. So until next time, inshallah. ولا صلينا الإنسان وفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.